Okay, so I think we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. And thanks for joining the webinar. My name is Nick Greenwood, and I'm delighted to be joined by Leo Cheung, Associate Director at the Carbon Trust, and Charlie Bridge, Minimum's Chief Operating Officer and Customer Lead. The topic of today's webinar is carbon inventory management plans and how they can boost data quality. We wanted to devote a webinar to this topic because carbon inventory management plans are often a forgotten element of footprinting. You don't hear that much about them, and there's not that much advice available. However, they can be a really useful tool for strategically improving data quality and enabling companies to make better decarbonisation decisions. They can also help you prepare for new GHG Protocol and climate disclosure rules, which have an increasing focus on how footprints have been developed. So in terms of structure of today's webinar, I'm going to give a very brief overview of what we mean by a carbon inventory management plan to set the table for the conversation. I'll then ask Leo and Charlie to share their insights on the value of inventory management plans, what makes for a good one, and how they can help companies prepare for changes to come. We'll try to allow a few minutes at the end for any questions. And finally, we'll finish with a special request that we have for your input on this topic. But just before we get started, a quick word on who we are. So at Minimum, we empower large enterprises to manage their carbon and environmental data without compromise. Our platform integrates with your existing systems to map, ingest, and audit emissions data across your entire organization and beyond. By delivering accurate and granular insights, we enable confident reporting and support your long-term decarbonisation efforts. We're delighted to be joined today by the Carbon Trust, who are a mission-driven organization focused on accelerating the move to a decarbonised future. They have over 20 years of experience in sustainability consultancy, and during that time, they've supported more than 3,000 businesses, governments, and financial institutions. They have deep technical expertise in GHG accounting, so they co-authored the technical guidance for the GHG Protocol Scope 3. They created the world's first product carbon footprint label, and they provided technical input for organizations like the SBTi and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. So just to frame the conversation a little bit before we get started, I wanted to briefly define what we mean by a carbon inventory management plan in the context of today's conversation. So you may have heard different terms be used to describe the same thing. The GHG protocol sometimes uses the term data management plan or quality management plan, but essentially they're referring to the same thing. And that is a system that, on the one hand, captures and documents the processes of what a company is doing to create and maintain its carbon inventory. And secondly, they set out a plan for how the company intends to improve that footprint over time to better facilitate decision making. The GHG Protocol guidance notes that a good carbon inventory management plan can help achieve four objectives. Firstly, it can help ensure the ongoing credibility of a company's GHG inventory. Secondly, it can systematically prevent and correct errors, both of which are obviously very important for the audit process. Thirdly, it enables meeting the principles of the GHG protocol and helps prepare for future regulatory changes. And fourthly, it can help identify areas where investment can unlock improvements in data quality to drive better decision making. Now, just to give you a sense of the type of information that you might collect in a carbon inventory management plan, it can include details about the organization, so who owns the plan, who is responsible for approving it, and how to change over time. Information on boundary conditions, so the parts of the organization and emission sources that are included in the inventory and what's excluded and why. Information on emissions quantification, so calculation methodologies that have been used, where they may be insufficient, and any use of assumptions and estimates. Information on data management, so your data collection procedures, the quality of the data that's been collected, areas for improvement, and so forth. Information on the approach to base year adjustments, so due to structural or methodology changes. Management tools, so things about the roles and responsibilities relating to the GHG inventory, as well as training and how and where that data is stored. And finally, information on auditing and verification, so processes to check data collection, the input and handling of data. So I hope that helps give you some context on what we're discussing today. Let's turn to Leo and Charlie to go into a little bit more detail. So Leo, welcome and thank you for joining us today. I know you've been working at the Carbon Trust for the last 7.5 years, I believe, and I'm sure you've seen a ton of footprints in your time. In your experience, what makes an inventory management plan valuable for companies, and what kinds of outcomes have you seen them help deliver in practice?
Great. Well, thanks, Nick, for inviting us on the webinar and for that introduction. And as the listeners, and it's great to be speaking with yourself and Charlie today. As the listeners can see there's a couple of different interpretations or different viewpoints on a carbon inventory management plan, but essentially it's a quality management system for carbon accounting and reporting. It really supports the calculation of a high quality carbon footprint and all the value that that brings to a company. I see it as two parallel threads running through the plan, and the value and focus of each is slightly different. One's going to be around documenting the data, the methodologies, the processes used, ensuring roles and responsibilities are captured to support that activity. And the key value of this is having that process well documented, repeatable by different people that might move through the business, mitigating business risk when changes happen. The other thread is about continually improving the quality of the footprint itself. So you get better insights, can improve relationships with suppliers, and ultimately improve the internal autonomy and ownership of emissions and drive decarbonisation and make the organisation ultimately more resilient. On the second thread in particular, it's important to note that this isn't going to happen all in year one. We see quite a familiar pattern with many organizations when they start doing their footprinting. In the first year, it's about compliance, about getting the data in the first place. They see where their gaps are within that data in the business. But in later years, we've seen many departments and individuals really take the lead and drive forward things like supplier engagement programs to get better data, collaboration, and decarbonisation. We've also seen that carbon inventory management plans result in ongoing activities throughout the year. So carbon footprinting isn't viewed as a purely year-end reporting activity. It's really about driving that external and also internal engagement to improve relationships externally, but improve business processes internally and product development internally. So we see that continual improvement happening throughout the year.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Leo. Really, really interesting. Charlie, I'd love to bring you into the conversation here. So at minimum, we're a carbon accounting software, of course. I know you're very closely involved in onboarding new customers and helping them to achieve their footprint goals. And I assume quite often that will be around increasing the quality of their footprint. How do you see the role of inventory management plans in helping customers achieve their objectives? And in general, do you find customers come in with a plan already, or is it something that they tend to build over time?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. It's a great question, and it's wonderful to be here to discuss this with Leo too. But to answer your question, a lot of our customers that we work with typically have very ambitious decarbonisation goals, but then their footprints aren't often at the level needed for making more specific decarbonisation decisions that with the confidence that they want. And usually that's because they're overwhelmed by the volume of the underlying data that they need to gather, they need to clean, structure, and just plain organize. So an inventory management plan can play a really important role in providing a bit of a stock take on the overall state of their data and to answer questions such as, what does my coverage look like? How much of my footprint is being estimated? How much of it is based on low quality versus high quality data? And that can then build confidence around how trustworthy and certain your data is. And once this information is in one place, it's a strategic starting point to figure out where to focus further efforts. So it helps answer questions such as, where should I focus next on getting better quality data? It can also help differentiate between the nice to have and the must do tasks. For example, there may be very limited value in automating how you gather travel data if it's immaterial to a particular company's footprint compared to, say, their utility providers. And that's actually quite a common situation that we see. But yeah, to come back to a question, we see all types of inventory management plans. A common theme is that they tend to be quite backward looking. So at the end of the year, some effort is put into summarizing what was done. One of the key objectives for us, though, is when working with a new customer, not just to understand what was done in the past, but to link that to what they're trying to do in the future, what they're aspiring to do. And this enables us to determine areas which can provide more appropriate tooling to make that transition a bit more of a reality. Otherwise, we're just flying blind.
Thanks, Charlie. That all resonates with me as well. Um, Leo, I'm sure you've seen a lot of different inventory management plans in your time. What do you think makes for a strong inventory management plan versus, say, a weaker one? And are there some things that companies tend to overlook when they prepare their inventory management plans?
Yeah, so just building on what Charlie said there, I think key to any good inventory management plan is that data management plan. It's such a fundamental and core aspects of carbon inventory footprinting, because essentially it is a modeling exercise when you get away from the direct emissions calculation that you might get for Scope 1, for example. It's all about the data. Good data in provides good footprinting. So it's really there's a big part of it around documentation and just ensuring that that's repeatable, but the core part is going to be around the data improvement plan. And companies need to have that really great understanding of the range of potential data that can be used for footprinting, of that data quality hierarchy, and the trade-offs and co-benefits that sit within that. So we take, for example, purchased goods and services. It's about moving from spend data to quantities, but it's also about moving from generic emission factors to specific ones. A good plan might include also improving those business processes to better capture that data quality, the quantity data itself. So engaging contractors, for example, where you initially might be getting spend information from them, engaging them for them to themselves collect quantity data so it can feed into your footprint, or engaging suppliers to provide product footprints. This should be all a key part of a core part of the plan. And there's lots of co-benefits from doing all of this. So the organization itself gets better management information, but it also improves relationships with suppliers. But it's all important to remember that it doesn't come without a cost. It's important to prioritize and to focus attention where it's most needed. Something that can often be overlooked is maintaining consistency across years. So that rebaselining that you mentioned earlier, Nick, it's important to track real reductions across time, so you can see the results of a company's efforts. And this can happen both when there are structural changes, but also when changes in data occur or methodology occurs. So moving from spend to quantities, but even moving from those generic factors to those specific factors, you may need to rebaseline. So companies ought to have or should have a rebaselining policy. The SBTR's criteria on this has led to focus on this, and a lot more companies are doing this, but it's always been a part of the core greenhouse gas protocol standards and best practice. Again, materiality and prioritization is key on this. You wouldn't necessarily rebaseline every single little change, so you want to be reviewing that internally, and when things step over a threshold, then you can rebaseline and publicly restate previous year's footprints.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Leo. Really, really valuable advice. I mean, I suppose, Charlie, taking just one step back, we often see customers come to us asking for methodology reports. Could you clarify just a little bit how an inventory management plan differs from a methodology report? And I guess, actually what companies might put into a sustainability report as well.
Yeah, that's something that it comes up quite a lot. They're fundamentally different. They serve different purposes and have different audiences. So a sustainability report is a vehicle for a company to disclose information on their overall footprint evolution and performance to external stakeholders. And the focus is on the climate-related risks and opportunities that their footprint creates, and the success of the company's actions to reduce emissions. So, for example, how well they met their targets. But external stakeholders might also want to know more detailed information about how the footprint was actually constructed, to know how much they can trust it. So a methodology report provides that detail to external stakeholders for a particular company. And in contrast to both of those, an inventory management plan is an internal governance tool, or I almost prefer to see it as a system. So it's not simply a file, even though a well-structured document is a great starting point. A good parallel here is information security management systems. The audience for an inventory management plan is primarily internal, and it explains a company's ongoing process for ensuring a high quality and credible footprint.
Fantastic. Thanks, Charlie. I think that's super clear. You mentioned sort of getting started, and Leo, I guess I'd like to come back to you and draw on your experience there. For a company that's maybe just getting started, or perhaps has done a very sort of basic first draft of an inventory management plan, where did you suggest they focus their efforts? And I mean, you touched on this a bit before, but what's the appropriate level of detail here? Because you can obviously go extremely deep. So yeah, interested in your thoughts on that.
Yep. So it's important to remember the inventory management plan will be a living document, much like the footprint itself. It's subject to continuous improvement. And you should begin capturing the key information while completing your first footprint. After completing that first year's footprint, then write it up and share it with the relevant departments. At the very least, you should refer to it when you come back the next year, but you should be updating it and working on it. It's much better to do that between year one and year two and between the year-end processes. So planning and prioritizing improvements based on materiality, the size of emission sources, and the data quality and uncertainty, but also how robust or not the processes are, how robust or not you are capturing that data in the first place within your systems is how you prioritize and work on it between year-end exercises. So as well as the data quality improvements mentioned before, other areas of improvements should focus on process and governance. For example, defining those roles, responsibilities, and reviews. So you may in the first year um, realize that there isn't good roles and responsibilities defined for certain areas of emissions to coordination with other parts of the business, coordinating with carbon accounting with financial year-end processes as well. So level of detail really depends on that materiality and risk. So the largest parts of the footprint, but also the ones that rely on most manual process and most data transformation as well, will be ripe to provide more detail. And the ones where the knowledge of those processes, that data, sit within certain individuals as well. So if they were to leave the organization, again, that's a higher business risk. So you want to make sure that the IMP is more robust and better documented for areas such as that.
Fantastic, Leo. That makes a lot of sense. And I think continuity is a big reason for doing a inventory management plan. I mean, I guess, Charlie, there is a point where an inventory management plan, I mean, you mentioned that it could start being a document, but you think of it more of a system. I mean, I guess there is a point where it can become this very long laundry list of information. It can be quite hard to actually make it actionable. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is it actually best to think of this as a sort of document, or is it somehow a living system embedded in the carbon accounting process? And if so, how would that work?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, and that challenge is we want to collect as much detailed information as possible on each and every data point owner within the entire carbon footprinting space. But at some stage, there can be just so much information that you can't see the wood for the trees. You just can get lost. But this is why I think it's important to focus on constructing your inventory management plan in a way that makes it easy to interrogate the key insights you're looking for. That could mean being able to quickly get answers to questions like what fraction of my footprint is based on estimates, or what fraction is based on spend data, or is being gathered using manual data processes. I also think it's really important to think of an inventory management plan, as you say, not as it's a tool, but it works over multiple time horizons. So we need to understand how we were doing things in the past, but also need to have a plan for this year and clear aspirations for the future. It's something that we believe that sustainability teams should be accessing and adjusting constantly. Really a living set of processes and tools. And that just reflects the reality of working with an evolving footprint while needing to meet regular reporting requirements.
Right, right. Really interesting, Charlie. And I think that sort of forward-looking view is particularly important. And so turning to the future, I guess, question for you here, Leo. So, I mean, obviously, we've seen IFRS S2 come out, the ESRS standards obviously being modified right now. But they are generally asking companies to disclose more detail about how their footprint was calculated. So it's not just the emissions value. But of course, this isn't just about compliance. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on how do you envisage a strong inventory management plan really helping companies to actually take action on their footprint and achieve some of those decarbonisation outcomes. And I guess the sort of secondary question, what role could a plan play in actually helping companies get ahead of some of those climate disclosure rules, or even, preparing for some potential updates to the GHG protocol, which I know is also asking for more disclosure around how the footprint's been calculated?
Yeah. When it comes to action, it's going to be down at that team department level as much as the overall corporate level. So a good plan and a good footprint will give each team, each department, as well as the overall corporate picture, it will give them that insight of their own departments and processes and products' contribution to the organization's emissions and how they can act to meet the overall corporate decarbonisation goals. So again, if we just take purchase goods and services as an example, most companies will already have a supply chain management program. So broadening this to include carbon will help on a couple of fronts. So gathering more supplier specific product footprints or proxy organizational data that will hopefully be more accurate and provide better and more accurate footprint for the reporting company. But there should be warning here because not all more specific data is more accurate. So it's definitely important to keep analyzing and understanding the data that comes through. But it also help those teams partner with suppliers to drive decarbonisation. So we've seen a lot of interesting examples of this, where organisations are in the first place setting targets for their suppliers, but much more collaborative approach, including we've seen financial incentives as well around that space. So that's kind of very interesting to help drive decarbonisation. In terms of a company's own products, if there is a large use phase category 11 emissions, then the plan should help understand and tackle all of that, likely through creating one's own product carbon footprints for one's own products and really understanding the impact and trade-offs within that, and looking, as Charlie says, kind of looking forward at multiple time horizons. It's about not only corporate evolution, it's about also transitioning this kind of wider transitional plan, revolutionary plan, and changing strategy as well, and looking forward into the future to see, bringing in climate risks and opportunities analysis to see where the future of the company stands in 5, 10, 20 years time. So in terms of the products, there'll be decisions around that. In terms of the detail, how representative are the product carbon footprints of the wider product range, bring in those future plans for product development using scenario analysis to model the impact of various choices and decisions. And this is where the carbon accounting, transition planning, corporate strategy all overlaps. In terms of disclosures, so this is, as you say, very fast developing area, whether it be those standards you mentioned, CSRD, R4S, or indeed organizations like the Partnership for Carbon Transparency, or PACT as they're known, SBTI requirements, or the update to the GHG Protocol standards themselves. All of this landscape around carbon footprinting disclosure is changing very quickly. And a good plan will define those responsibilities, those roles, responsibilities to keep up to date with all of those for the various purposes that carbon footprint is used. As you say, there is a general trend to increase disclosure, to increase the transparency of one's footprint, what goes into it, the quality of the data, the sources, methodologies, even as well. So again, a good plan should provide that governance to keep on top of all those requirements.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, I mean, we've looked into obviously the GHG protocol upcoming revision process quite a bit, and there's proposals obviously not approved yet to break down scope 3 into how much data is specific, non-specific, spend, etc., or break down your scope 2 approach by different hierarchies. So I think inventory management plan can be potentially really helpful there. Charlie, my final question for you, and I'll come back to Leo for the last question. Given everything we discussed, what role do you think software can play in supporting the inventory management planning process in practice? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think software has a huge amount of value to bring. And the key power that it has is the ability to connect different types of data, different data points. So we can tag different data elements with various properties. And this can make it very easy for a user to query that data to get the insights that really matter here, and some of which I mentioned earlier. But to give an example, if we're tagging every data point with whether or not it's been estimated or not, you can get a quick answer to what fraction of my footprint is estimated, and then more towards decarbonisation, which part of my footprint contributes most towards that estimation, and should I then resolve that? But beyond that, or maybe more looking more towards action, it can also facilitate real-time tracking of the plan itself. So we can see how our data collection is progressing and make adjustments if things aren't going to plan. And that, as every sustainability team will know, things don't always go according to plan. And taking that even further, if an inventory management plan is embedded in software, it can add even more value when that software is connected to other features of a robust environmental data management system. For example, the ever-changing list of data submitters across an organization is something that can no longer, sit in a spreadsheet somewhere. But if it's a core part of a platform that is then connected to a plan, these things are all linked. So if a user changes, then the tooling they need to use further down the line is automatically going to update. And this can also apply to a whole host of other types of features, many of which we're building here at Minimum to help sustainability managers stay on top of the overall footprinting process.
Fantastic. Really interesting, Charlie. Leo, I'm going to save the last question for you. I mean, how do you see Carbon Trust helping support this transition? And I guess I've just also seen a question in the chat as well, which is, do you recommend having a single inventory management plan that covers, say, the whole company, or separate ones for business units and geographies?
Okay. So yeah, the Carbon Trust, we've as you said in your intro, we're leading experts, specialists in this area. We do accounting, reporting, but we also do many other things: strategy development, transition planning, climate risks and opportunities analysis, as well as looking at how to finance and transitions. So we work on various levels as well. So at the organizational level, but also product level, we've got a large product labeling offering, but also the sector level as well, looking at those cross-sectoral transitions and initiatives, especially, for example, in the wind energy and ICT space. In terms of that question there, does a single inventory or uh, specific geographies? I think it really depends on the organization, and it will be context specific. I'd say, as to Charlie's point, the framework should be kind of systemic, and there should be one master framework across the whole organization. And then it really depends on how separate and discrete the departments are, the data and the processes are. So, but each organization and each business unit, each department should have a plan that suits their needs and their business and their systems as well. So, what should be clear though from a plan with a large company that's diverse, that has many business units or geographies, is the handoff points to the central team. So generally there will be a central team that will be collating, coordinating the group footprint. So it's important to have that those handoffs in terms of responsibilities, in terms of the data, very clearly stated in the inventory management plan. And again, John's point is a living, breathing document. You'll take a process in year one, you'll look to refine that before year two and improve the way that the process works, not only the data as well, from year one to year two.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Leo, for your comments on that. I saw a question here from Diane, which is actually quite relevant. Diane, you were asking, would Minimum consider having a template and guidance for a carbon inventory in the system? It's something actually we are working on. And just before today, I want to share a quick request from Minimum. We are really interested to learn more about the needs and challenges that you're facing when creating and managing a carbon inventory management plan. It's great input for us to continue improving our product and platform. So anyone in the audience that's able and interested in having that conversation with us, there's a link, I think, and a QR code. If you'd like to take part, obviously we'd really appreciate your insights on that. And finally, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending, to thank Leo and Charlie for sharing their insights today. We'll be sending out a recording of today's webinar, but that's all for now, and wishing you a great day, rest of your day.
Great. Thanks very much, Nick. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Leah.